In a quiet village surrounded by green hills and sparkling rivers, there lived a young boy named Kale. Kale was not a prince, a knight, or a hero of any kind. He was just a stable boy. Every morning, long before the sun rose, Kale would wake up to the sound of horses neighing and the soft clatter of hooves. His hands were always rough and calloused from feeding and cleaning the animals, but Kale did not mind. He loved the horses. They were his friends, his companions in a life that had few pleasures. The village people barely noticed him. They had important matters to attend to, markets to run, fields to plow, and disputes to settle. Kale moved through the streets silently, carrying buckets of water or mops and brushes for the stables. Yet, despite the simplicity of his life, Kale often found himself gazing at the mountains beyond the village. He imagined the world beyond them. Vast forests, shimmering lakes, and strange, unknown creatures. He dreamed of adventure, though he had never dared to leave the village. One cold morning, as the sun stretched its first light across the horizon, Kale noticed something strange. The air was unusually still. The birds were silent. Even the horses seemed uneasy. Kale tilted his head and squinted toward the mountains. There, high above the peaks, a shadow moved across the sky. It was enormous, darker than a cloud and larger than any bird he had ever seen. Kale's heart beat faster. He rubbed his eyes. Surely it was just a trick of the light, or perhaps the clouds moving too quickly. But deep down he knew he had seen something unusual. Kale shook his head and returned to his work. He brushed the horses' coats, fed them hay, and filled their water troughs. Yet his mind kept drifting back to the shadow in the sky. What had it been? Dragons? No, dragons were creatures of old stories, tales told to scare children or impress travelers. They had not existed for hundreds of years, or so everyone believed. And yet, Kale could not shake the feeling that something powerful was awake in the mountains. That evening, after finishing his chores, Kale sat outside the stable and watched the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of red and gold, and the mountains stood tall and silent in the distance. The shadow returned, fleeting this time, like a whisper. Kale leaned forward, holding his breath. For a moment, he thought he saw the outline of a dragon's wing. His heart pounded in his chest. "What am I seeing?" he whispered to himself. Kale's father had died when he was very young, leaving him with his mother and a life of hard work. She worried constantly about his safety, telling him to stay close to the village and avoid unnecessary risks. But Kale's curiosity burned stronger than his fear. That night he could not sleep. He dreamed of mountains, of flying creatures with scales like molten gold, and of a destiny far greater than sweeping stables. The next morning, Kale's routine continued as usual, yet there was a tension in the air. He worked faster than ever, trying to ignore the strange feeling that something was about to change. While brushing the horses, he noticed one of them, a strong black stallion named Zephyr, acting unusually restless. Zephyr's ears twitched, and he stamped his hooves nervously. Kale knelt beside him. "Easy, boy," he said softly, rubbing Zephyr's neck. "It's all right. Nothing is going to hurt us." But Zephyr would not calm down. Then Kale saw it, a faint glow coming from the far edge of the stables. Curious and cautious, he followed the light. Behind a pile of hay, he found a small stone, glowing with a strange blue fire. Kale reached out with trembling fingers. The moment his hand touched it, a shock ran through his body. Images flashed before his eyes. Mountains, dragons, fire, and a voice whispering, "You are chosen." Kale stumbled back, breathless and shaken. "Chosen for what?" he murmured. The stone dimmed, returning to normal. He glanced around. No one had seen him. Kale pocketed the stone, unsure if he should tell anyone. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, as if something inside him had awakened. Days passed, but Kale could not stop thinking about the stone or the shadow in the sky. At night, he would sneak out of the small house he shared with his mother and stare at the mountains, hoping for another sign. He began to notice small changes in himself. His senses felt sharper. He could hear the faintest sounds in the stable, see the tiniest details in the dark. And most surprising of all, the horses seemed to trust him more than ever, even responding to gestures Cale did not remember teaching them. One evening, Cale ventured farther than he ever had before. The village ended and the forest began. The trees were tall and thick, their branches casting long shadows under the moonlight. Cale walked carefully, guided by a feeling he could not explain. Then, he heard it. A low rumble, like distant thunder but closer, alive. His heart froze. He crouched behind a large rock and peeked toward the source. There, in a small clearing, he saw it. A creature as massive as a mountain, scales glittering under the moon, eyes glowing like embers. It was a dragon. Cale could hardly breathe. He had never seen anything so magnificent, so terrifying. The dragon looked at him, tilting its head as if curious. Then, something extraordinary happened. It knelt, lowering its massive body to the ground. Cale's mind raced. Why was it bowing? He had done nothing, nothing at all. The dragon made no sound, yet Cale could feel a strange connection, a silent understanding passing between them. He slowly approached, holding out his hand. The dragon's eye followed every movement. When Cale finally reached out, the dragon lowered its head closer, brushing him gently with its snout. Cale stepped back, awe and fear swirling together. His life, so ordinary just days ago, had changed forever. The shadow in the sky, the glowing stone, the whisper of destiny. Everything pointed to a future he could never have imagined. Cale did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The mountains were calling, and the dragons were waking. And somewhere deep inside him, a spark had ignited, a spark that would one day make him more than a stable boy. As Cale returned to the village that night, he did not look back. But he knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. Something powerful, something ancient had chosen him, and whether he was ready or not, his journey had begun. Cale woke up before dawn, just like every other day. But today felt different. His hands trembled slightly as he tied his worn boots. The glow of the strange stone in his pocket seemed warmer, pulsing faintly as if urging him to move. He didn't know why, but Cale felt an irresistible pull toward the mountains, toward the unknown. He stepped quietly out of the small cottage he shared with his mother. The village was still asleep, the streets empty and silent. Cale's heart pounded with both fear and excitement. He carried only a satchel with a loaf of bread and some water, and, of course, the mysterious stone. He followed the path that led through the forest, winding slowly upward toward the mountains. The forest was alive with sounds. Leaves rustled, branches creaked, and distant owls hooted in the darkness. But Cale noticed something unusual. The usual chatter of birds was gone. A strange silence had fallen over the woods, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. After hours of walking, Cale reached a narrow clearing. Sunlight was breaking through the tall trees, casting long, thin shadows across the forest floor. And there, lying near a small stream, he saw it. A massive dragon, wounded and struggling. Its scales shimmered like silver in the sunlight, but deep scratches ran across its side, and one of its wings hung awkwardly. Its eyes, glowing softly, watched Cale with a mix of pain and fear. Cale froze. His mind raced. Dragons were dangerous, ancient creatures known for their fire and strength. Yet, looking at this dragon, all he felt was a strange pull of empathy. He could not turn away. Slowly, he approached. "It's okay," Cale whispered, voice shaking. "I won't hurt you." The dragon blinked, almost as if it understood. Its breathing was heavy, and smoke curled faintly from its nostrils. Cale knelt beside it, examining the wound. His hands were rough but gentle. Using cloth from his satchel, he cleaned the cuts, careful not to touch sensitive areas. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, the dragon lowered its head slightly, letting Cale work. Cale's heart pounded. He had never been this close to something so enormous, so alive, so aware. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Cale looked up. Another shadow passed over the clearing. This one was larger, darker, and far more threatening than the first. Kale's first thought was panic. But the dragon he was tending lifted its head and made a deep, resonating sound. A growl, but also a warning. The shadow hesitated, and Kale realized it was another dragon, circling above, watching, waiting. The wounded dragon leaned closer to Kale, almost pressing its massive body against him. It was a gesture of trust, something Kale did not understand but felt deeply. He knew one thing: the dragon had chosen him. Not randomly, not by chance. But Kale had no idea why. Hours passed. Kale worked tirelessly, binding the wing with strips of cloth and mud to hold it steady. He fed the dragon small pieces of bread. It ate cautiously at first, then with more confidence. Kale whispered to it softly, telling it stories of the village, of his life as a stable boy, and of dreams he had never shared with anyone. The dragon listened. Its glowing eyes never left him. Kale felt a strange warmth in his chest. A connection had formed, one he could not explain. He had read stories of ancient dragons in the old village books, tales of beasts that could sense the hearts of humans. Kale felt that now. This dragon was more than an animal. It was aware, intelligent, and somehow waiting for him. As night approached, Kale built a small fire, careful not to scare the dragon. He sat beside it, leaning against its massive side. The forest around them was alive with nocturnal sounds, but neither seemed afraid. Kale wondered if he was dreaming. A stable boy, alone in the forest, sitting beside a dragon. It seemed impossible, and yet it was real. Suddenly, a whisper of wind carried a strange voice to him, not spoken aloud, but in his mind, soft and commanding. "You are chosen. You must learn. You are the one." Kale's eyes widened. He clutched his head, trying to understand. Was the dragon speaking to him? Was it the stone in his pocket? Or was something deeper, something older, calling him? Before he could ponder further, a sudden noise snapped his attention back. Rustling leaves, sharp, quick footsteps, and a low growl. Kale's heart raced. From the shadows emerged three figures, cloaked and armed, their faces hidden. They moved silently but with deadly intent. Kale instinctively placed himself between the dragon and the strangers. "You shouldn't be here, boy," one of them said, voice cold and flat. "Step aside, or this creature dies." Kale's hands shook. Fear clawed at his chest. But he remembered the dragon beside him, trusting him. Something inside him shifted. A surge of courage he had never known. "No," he said firmly. "You won't hurt him." The cloaked figures advanced. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter, smoke curling from its nostrils. Its tail lashed the ground, causing tremors. Kale realized something. The dragon was responding to him, to his will, to his courage. It was no longer just an animal, it was a partner, a protector. The strangers hesitated. The dragon made a deep, low roar, shaking the clearing. Kale's voice grew stronger as he whispered words he didn't fully understand. "Back, go away." The strangers faltered and, after a tense moment, retreated into the forest, leaving only silence behind. Kale sank to the ground, trembling from fear and relief. The dragon lowered its head again, nudging him gently. Kale realized that today had changed everything. He had faced danger, protected the dragon, and somehow survived. Night fully fell, and the stars began to sparkle above. Kale leaned against the dragon, staring at the sky. The mountains loomed silently in the distance, their peaks shadowed and mysterious. The dragon beside him let out a soft, almost approving sound. Kale knew in his heart that this was just the beginning. He did not know what the voice had meant or why he had been chosen. He did not know the purpose of the stone or why dragons had awakened now. But one thing was certain. Kale was no longer just a stable boy. The world was far larger, far stranger, and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. As sleep finally overtook him, Kale dreamed of wings, of fire, of mountains filled with creatures that had not been seen for centuries. He dreamed of a destiny he did not yet understand, but one that was calling him, demanding him to rise. When the first light of dawn broke across the mountains, Kale opened his eyes. The dragon stirred beside him, uninjured but watchful. The forest seemed different now, filled with possibilities, threats, and mysteries. Kale stood, brushing dirt from his clothes. His adventure had begun, and nothing, no danger, no fear, no stranger, would ever make him turn back. Kale returned to the village as the sun climbed the sky, his legs aching and his heart still pounding from the previous night. He moved quietly, careful not to be seen. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The dragon, majestic, ancient, and alive, was real, and somehow it had trusted him. He hid the glowing stone in a small pouch under his tunic and went about his chores in the stables. The horses seemed calmer than ever, almost as if they knew something had changed in Kale. He brushed their coats, fed them, and filled the water troughs, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept glancing toward the mountains, wondering what other secrets they held. Over the next few days, Kale noticed strange things happening. When he walked near the river, fish seemed to swim toward him, almost as if recognizing his presence. Birds would land nearby, chirping curiously, not afraid of him. Once, while lifting a heavy bucket of water, it felt lighter in his hands than it should have. Small things, subtle things, but unmistakable. Kale's pulse quickened. The stone? Or something inside him awakening? At night, Kale would sneak into the forest to visit the dragon again. Each time, he felt a growing connection. He could almost sense the dragon's emotions: fear, pain, even curiosity. And every time he touched it, a warmth would flow from the creature into him. A strange power that made him stronger, braver, more aware. One evening, Kale tried something new. He closed his eyes, focused, and imagined the dragon's wing lifting. Slowly, to his amazement, it moved, ever so slightly. Kale opened his eyes, heart racing. He looked at the dragon. Its eyes glowed brighter, almost proudly, as if it understood that Kale had control over more than just his own fear. But Kale did not yet understand the limits of this power. The stone pulsed more strongly, reacting to the dragon, to him, and to the energy around them. Something ancient was stirring. Not just the dragon, but a force older than the village, older than the mountains themselves. Kale could feel it in the wind, in the rustling leaves, in the hum of the earth beneath his feet. Meanwhile, in the shadows beyond the village, eyes watched. A group of cloaked figures had seen Kale in the forest. They whispered among themselves about the boy who could tame dragons. One of them, tall and stern, spoke with a voice like ice. "He is stronger than we thought," he said. "He is awakening. We must act before he learns his full power." Kale was unaware of the danger closing in. He only knew the pull of the mountains, the call of the dragons, and the growing power within him. One night, as a storm rolled over the village, Kale awoke to a strange sensation. The stone in his pocket burned warmly against his skin. He jumped out of bed, sensing urgency. Pulling on his cloak, he dashed into the rain-soaked streets and toward the forest. Lightning flashed, illuminating the path ahead, and thunder shook the ground. At the clearing, he found the dragon in distress. Its injured wing thrashed, mud and rain making it difficult to move. Kale rushed to its side, reaching out with his hands. The moment he touched the dragon, a surge of energy shot through him. He gasped, gripping the creature's scales as a strange warmth spread through his arms and chest. The dragon's eyes glowed like molten fire, and Kale heard the whisper again, clearer this time. "You are the one, the chosen, the protector." Kale's knees shook. "Protector of what?" he whispered. Before the answer came, the trees shook violently. From the shadows, figures emerged, cloaked and armed, just like before. They advanced, eyes gleaming with malice. Kale stood firm, placing himself between the dragon and the strangers. "You should not be here," one of them said. "Step aside, boy, or the creature dies." Kale felt the warmth of the stone pulsing stronger than ever. He raised his hand instinctively, willing the dragon to move. The dragon rose, its injured wings stabilizing as if responding to Kale's will. The strangers faltered, shocked. Kale felt a strange clarity, a command flowing through him. He didn't know how, but he understood that this was his power, to protect, to command, to awaken the strength of creatures older than memory. "Leave," Kale said, voice shaking but strong. "Or face me." The cloaked figures hesitated. The dragon's eyes flared, smoke curling from its nostrils. It let out a low roar, shaking the forest with its power. Kale felt the surge of energy again, coursing through his veins, amplifying his courage. For the first time, he felt like more than a stable boy. The strangers retreated into the storm, disappearing into the darkness. Kale's hands dropped to his sides, trembling with relief and awe. He looked at the dragon, now calm again. The connection between them had grown deeper, stronger. Kale understood something vital. He had been chosen not just to survive, but to lead, to command, to protect these ancient beings. Days turned into weeks, and Kale continued to explore his newfound abilities. He practiced moving objects with his mind, communicating silently with the dragon, and sensing things others could not. Villagers began to notice changes around him. Small, unexplained miracles that they could not understand. Crops grew faster near his touch. The village animals followed him without command. And sometimes, strange lights flickered in the forest at night. Kale did not tell anyone about the stone, the whispers, or the dragon. He knew that revealing too much could bring danger, both to himself and to the creature he now considered a friend. Yet, each night, he returned to the forest, eager to test his limits and learn more about the power awakening within him. One evening, the dragon nudged Kale toward the mountains. It was an unspoken message. Kale understood immediately. The mountains held more secrets, more dragons, and perhaps the answers to the voice that had called him chosen. As he climbed higher, the wind howled, and shadows danced across the jagged rocks. Lightning flashed, revealing glimpses of enormous shapes perched atop cliffs. Ancient dragons, their eyes glowing in the storm. Kale's heart pounded with awe and fear. These creatures were older and more powerful than he could imagine. And yet, he felt connected. The stone in his pocket pulsed again, warmer than ever. Kale knew that his life was no longer ordinary. He was no longer a simple stable boy. He had power, purpose, and a destiny tied to creatures older than time itself. The world was vast, dangerous, and full of mysteries, and Kale would face them all. As the storm raged around him, Kale looked toward the tallest peak. He whispered to himself, with determination burning in his chest, "I will not fail. I will protect them, and I will learn." The mountains echoed with a low, resonant roar. The dragons had heard him, and somewhere in the distance, a shadow moved, watching, waiting, and knowing that Kale's journey had only just begun. Kale had never felt so alive. The mountain air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the roar of distant waterfalls filled the silence. Every morning, he returned to the clearing where the dragon waited for him. Its scales glimmered under the sun, shining like silver and gold. Each day, Kale learned something new, about the dragon, about himself, and about the strange power that flowed between them. The dragon's name, he had decided, was Elian. He didn't know if the creature truly understood the word, but it seemed to respond. Elian would nudge Kale with his massive head, flap his injured wing gently, or circle around him in playful arcs. It was teaching Kale as much as Kale was teaching it. Patience, understanding, and trust. Kale began his training cautiously. He lifted small stones with his mind, trying to move them slowly at first, then faster, testing his limits. He practiced communicating with Elian silently, imagining commands and watching the dragon respond. It was exhausting work, and often he failed, dropping stones or misdirecting the dragon. But every failure taught him something new. One morning, Kale stood at the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping his cloak around him. Elian landed beside him, powerful wings folding neatly. Kale clenched his fists and concentrated. Slowly, Elian lifted into the air, hovering in place. Kale smiled, feeling a rush of pride. But pride was dangerous. Suddenly, the wind shifted violently, and a shadow darkened the cliff. Kale squinted and froze. Another dragon, larger, darker, and far more threatening than any he had seen, descended from the stormy sky. Its eyes were sharp, its claws like steel. This dragon was not friendly. Elian hissed and bared his teeth, smoke curling from his nostrils. Kale's heart raced. He could sense the hostility radiating from the newcomer. The dark dragon circled them, wings beating the air with deafening force. Kale swallowed his fear. He knew he had to act. "Focus, Elian," he whispered. "We can do this together." Elian roared in response, and Kale felt the familiar surge of energy, the power that flowed between them. He reached out, mentally guiding the dragon, directing its movements. Elian lunged at the dark dragon, wings slicing through the air. Sparks of fire erupted as the dragons clashed, the sound echoing off the cliffs. Kale's heart pounded, and his mind raced. He could feel the stone in his pocket burning, urging him to push harder, to command stronger. The dark dragon was fast, vicious, and relentless. Elian struggled, but Kale's determination never wavered. He focused every thought, every breath, and slowly, the dark dragon faltered. It circled higher, then suddenly dove into the clouds, disappearing from sight. Kale sank to his knees, exhausted and shaking, but relieved. Elian landed beside him, pressing his massive head against Kale's shoulder. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in fire and fear. Days passed and Kale's training intensified. He learned to control Elian's movements more precisely, to anticipate his thoughts, and to project his energy over longer distances. He could feel the connection growing deeper, almost like a second heartbeat. But with each success came new challenges. The mountains were filled with dangers, wild beasts, treacherous cliffs, and strange phenomena Kale did not yet understand. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kale noticed a strange glow from a nearby cave. Curiosity and caution battled inside him. He approached slowly, Elian following closely. Inside the cave, he found a wall of ancient carvings. Dragons, humans, stars, and strange symbols. The carvings seemed to shimmer faintly under the torchlight, as if alive. Kale traced a hand over the symbols. A surge of warmth coursed through him, and images flashed in his mind. Dragons bowing to humans, battles fought in the skies, and a prophecy. When the chosen awakens, the dragons shall rise, and the balance of the world will shift. Kale staggered back, his mind reeling. He was the chosen. He was part of this prophecy. But what did it mean? And what dangers lay ahead? The next day, Kale faced another challenge. Not from dragons or magic, but from the villagers. Rumors had begun to spread about strange lights in the mountains, strange events in the forest, and a boy who disappeared for hours at a time. Some villagers whispered about witchcraft or curses. Kale's mother worried constantly, and villagers began watching him with suspicion. Kale knew he could not reveal the truth. Not yet. Elian's safety, the stone's secret, and his own destiny depended on caution. Yet the pressure weighed heavily on him. He felt torn between the ordinary life he had known and the extraordinary path that stretched before him. One night, as Kale practiced with Elian near the cliff, the dark dragon returned, accompanied by two smaller but equally dangerous companions. They had been waiting, patient and cunning. Kale's pulse quickened. He knew this was a test, not just of his power, but of his courage, strategy, and connection with Elian. The battle that followed was fierce. The dragons clashed in midair, fire and smoke filling the sky. Kale directed Elian, sending him in precise arcs, anticipating the enemy's moves. He felt exhaustion creeping in, but also exhilaration. This was not just a fight. It was training, preparation for greater challenges to come. In the end, the dark dragons retreated, leaving Kale and Elian victorious but battered. Kale fell to the ground, gasping for breath. Elian nudged him gently, as if proud of his progress. Kale smiled, despite the pain and fear. He was growing stronger, wiser, and braver every day. As the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Kale looked toward the horizon. He understood now that training was only the beginning. Challenges would come larger, fiercer, and more dangerous than he could imagine. But with Elian by his side, and the power within him awakening, Kale felt ready. The mountains held secrets, ancient and powerful. The dragons were rising, and Kale, once a simple stable boy, was beginning to rise with them. The wind howled across the mountains, carrying a chill that cut through Kale's cloak. He stood on the cliff's edge, heart pounding, staring at the valley below. Smoke and fire rose from the forest. The dark dragons had returned, stronger, faster, and more numerous than before. They had brought an army, creatures twisted by greed and malice, determined to claim the power of the dragons for themselves. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the familiar warmth of the stone in his pocket. It pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat, as if encouraging him to rise, to command, to fight. Elian nudged him with his massive head, smoke curling from his nostrils. Kale placed his hand on the dragon's snout, feeling the surge of energy flow between them. He had trained for this moment, yet the fear gnawed at his chest. "Stay close, Elian," he whispered. "We can do this. Together." With a roar, Elian leapt into the sky, wings slicing through the stormy clouds. Kale mounted, gripping the dragon's scales. The air was thick with tension as they soared above the battlefield. Below them, the enemy forces spread like a dark shadow, twisting the forest into chaos. Villagers had fled, but the threat was greater than anyone could imagine. Kale raised his hands, channeling the power he had been learning to control. The stone pulsed stronger, guiding him. Elian let out a deafening roar, the sound carrying across the mountains like thunder. The dark dragons paused, sensing the shift in power. Kale felt it too, a deep, ancient energy stirring within the mountains, answering his call. The first dark dragon lunged toward them, claws extended and eyes glowing with malice. Kale directed Elian, dodging and weaving through the storm. Fire met fire, scales clashed, and the sky erupted in a blaze of color. Kale shouted commands, guiding Elian with precision. The bond between them was stronger than ever, almost instinctive. Each thought Kale sent was felt by the dragon, each movement mirrored in perfect harmony. As the battle raged, something incredible happened. From the highest peaks of the mountains, shadows moved. Enormous wings unfurled, scales glimmering like jewels in the lightning. The ancient dragons had awakened. One by one, they descended from the cliffs, massive and awe-inspiring, their eyes glowing with wisdom and power. Kale's heart skipped a beat. These were the creatures of legend, older than the mountains themselves. And they bowed not in fear but in respect. Toward him, toward a stable boy who had proven courage, heart, and a bond stronger than any magic. The dark dragons roared in defiance, charging toward Kale and Elian. But the arrival of the ancient dragons changed everything. A wall of immense power descended upon the battlefield. The enemy faltered, terror in their eyes. Kale felt the warmth of the stone surge through him, amplifying his command. He did not understand fully how, but he knew this was his moment. "Now, Elian!" Kale shouted. The dragon soared forward, flames bursting from his mouth. Kale extended his hands, directing the fire toward the enemy. The dark dragons shrieked, retreating under the combined might of Kale, Elian, and the ancient dragons. One by one, they fell back, their courage broken by the overwhelming force before them. Kale felt the wind whip past his face, smelled the smoke and fire, and heard the thunder of dragon wings above. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be more than a boy from a small village. He was a leader, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. And the dragons recognized it. As the last of the dark dragons fled into the clouds, the battlefield fell silent. The ancient dragons circled above Kale, their wings casting shadows over the forest. Elian landed beside him, and Kale slid from his back, falling to his knees in exhaustion. The connection he felt with the dragons was deeper than ever, unbreakable and electric. One of the ancient dragons, larger than any Kale had seen, descended slowly. His eyes, glowing like molten gold, met his. It lowered its massive head until its horn touched Kale's shoulder. A gentle yet powerful acknowledgement. Kale's heart soared. He was no longer just a boy. He was a dragon king. The villagers, who had watched from a distance, dared to approach. Fear and awe filled their eyes. They had always seen Kale as a humble, stable boy. But now, standing beside dragons, commanding power beyond imagination, he was something else entirely. A protector, a leader, a hero. Kale looked at the mountains, feeling the energy thrumming beneath his feet. He understood that this victory was just the beginning. The ancient dragons had chosen him, and with them, he would face challenges far greater than any he had imagined. The galaxy beyond the mountains called to him, vast, mysterious, and dangerous. But for now, Kale allowed himself a moment of triumph. He had survived, he had grown stronger, and he had earned the trust of creatures older than time. His bond with Elian had solidified, unbreakable and pure. And as he stood there, feeling the weight of destiny on his shoulders, Kale whispered softly, "I am ready." Above, the dragons circled in a magnificent display, wings cutting through the clouds, casting shadows over the valley. Kale watched them, feeling a surge of hope and power. He knew the challenges were far from over, that dangers awaited in the shadows beyond the mountains. But he also knew one thing: he was no longer alone. He was chosen, he was strong, and he was the Dragon King. The mountains roared in the wind, the stone pulsed in his pocket, and Kale felt a strange calm settle over him. The ancient dragons had acknowledged him. The bond between humans and dragons had begun again. And somewhere, deep in the distance, a new journey was waiting. A journey across lands unknown, filled with mystery, adventure, and battles yet to come. Kale lifted his head, eyes shining with determination. The first battle had been won, but the war for the dragons, the mountains, and the world beyond was only beginning. And Kale, the stable boy turned Dragon King, would face it all. The sun rose over the mountains, casting golden light across the valley. Smoke from the previous battle still lingered in the air, but a sense of calm had returned. Kale stood on the cliff's edge, Elian by his side, looking over the village and the forest below. The world felt larger now, full of possibilities and dangers he had never imagined. He had changed. He was no longer a stable boy. He was the Dragon King. Villagers cautiously returned to the valley, their eyes wide with awe. They had always seen Kale as simple, hardworking, and ordinary. But now, standing beside dragons, he seemed extraordinary. Some bowed to him. Others whispered prayers of thanks for saving the village from the dark dragons. Kale nodded humbly, but he knew the battle he had fought was just the beginning. Elian nudged him gently, smoke curling from his nostrils. Kale smiled and placed a hand on the dragon's massive head. The bond between them had grown stronger with every challenge, every battle, every moment of fear and courage. Kale could sense Elian's thoughts and feelings almost as clearly as his own. Together, they were stronger than anything the mountains could throw at them. Kale spent the next days helping the village rebuild. Houses damaged by the battle were repaired, the forest cleared of debris, and animals cared for. He shared his knowledge of dragons cautiously, teaching the villagers to respect them rather than fear them. Slowly, the villagers began to understand that dragons were not just monsters from stories. They were powerful, intelligent, and protective creatures. But Kale knew the mountains held more secrets. He had felt the stirrings of ancient energy, and he could sense that other dragons, larger and older than Elian, were still hidden. They were watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. And Kale was ready to face them when the time came. One night, as Kale stood alone on a cliff watching the stars, the stone in his pocket pulsed with warmth. He closed his eyes, and a whisper echoed in his mind. The galaxy is vast, threats are coming. The chosen must rise. Kale opened his eyes, feeling both excitement and fear. He understood that the battle for the mountains was only the start. There were worlds beyond the horizon, ancient forces that even the dragons feared, and Kale would have to be ready. The next morning, Elian and Kale flew high above the mountains. The wind rushed past them, carrying the scent of pine, snow, and the distant ocean. Below, the village looked peaceful, safe for now. But Kale's eyes were drawn to the horizon, to distant mountains shrouded in mist, to lands unexplored. The galaxy was calling, and Kale knew he could not stay in one place forever. His destiny was greater than a single village or a single mountain. As they soared, Kale felt the presence of other dragons nearby. Shadows passed across the clouds, dragons of immense size, some perched on cliff edges, others gliding silently through the skies. They had come to acknowledge him, the Dragon King, the protector of their kind. Kale felt a sense of awe mixed with responsibility. He understood that he was not just a boy chosen by dragons. He was a leader, a guardian, and a bridge between worlds. Returning to the village, Kale found his mother waiting, worry etched on her face. He knelt and embraced her, holding her tightly. "I'm safe," he whispered, "and I'll protect everyone, including the dragons." She smiled through tears, proud and fearful at the same time. Kale knew she still did not understand everything, but he promised himself he would keep her safe. Days passed, and Kale continued to train with Elian. The bond between them was almost magical. Kale could sense Elian's thoughts, guide him with a simple gesture, and feel the dragon's emotions as if they were his own. Together, they patrolled the mountains, explored hidden valleys, and discovered ancient ruins carved into cliffs, evidence of civilizations long gone. Each discovery revealed more about the dragon's history and the immense responsibility Kale now carried. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kale and Elian returned to the clearing where the first dragon encounter had happened. A faint glow shimmered in the grass, the stone pulsing once more. Kale knelt and held it in his hands. He understood that the stone was not just a guide. It was a link to something greater, a connection to the dragons and to the ancient forces of the world. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the clearing. Kale looked up. A massive dragon, older and larger than any he had seen, descended slowly, landing with grace and power. Its eyes, like molten gold, studied Kale carefully. Then it lowered its head in acknowledgement, bowing to him. Kale felt a surge of pride and fear. This was a creature older than the mountains themselves, and it recognized him as the Dragon King. Elian nudged Kale's side, and together they watched as other dragons joined, circling in the sky. It was a display of power, respect, and unity. Kale realized that he was now part of something larger than himself, larger than the mountains, larger than the village. The dragons had chosen him as their leader, and the galaxy awaited. Kale's thoughts turned to the future. He knew threats were coming, forces that would challenge everything he had learned. Dark creatures, rival factions, and unknown dangers beyond the mountains. But he also knew he was ready. With Elian, the ancient dragons, and the power awakening within him, Kale could face anything. As the night deepened, Kale looked to the stars, imagining distant worlds filled with dragons, adventure, and ancient mysteries. A new era had begun. The era of Kale, the Dragon King, protector of dragons, and guardian of the galaxy. His journey was only beginning, and the universe held infinite possibilities. Kale whispered to the night, filled with determination and hope, "I will protect them, I will lead them, and I will rise to meet whatever comes." Above him, dragons circled in a magnificent display, their wings slicing the night sky, casting shadows over the mountains and valleys. The wind carried their roars far and wide, a signal to the world that a new era had begun. Kale, once a simple stable boy, had become a legend in the making. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in the depths of the galaxy, unseen forces stirred, sensing the rise of the Dragon King. The adventure was far from over. The universe had awakened, and Kale was ready to meet it head-on.